All right, hello, and welcome to tonight's live stream where we are world building and creating some gods. That's right. There was a bit of a technical glitch at the beginning. When isn't there a technical glitch? Of course, I do hope that you can hear me. And so let's see what happens in tonight's stream. Not a lot of the lights have been turned on because it's hot as Hades here in London. It's currently sitting at 27 degrees Celsius in my studio, which is pretty warm, let me tell you. Right, so hopefully you have seen the video on the gods that I made earlier. And so that's what we're going to be jumping into. Now, previously we had made, we had discussed magic and what was the magic and where did the magic come from and things like that. So that's what we have done. We've put magic aside and we've basically said that magic is like a pervasive fluid that surrounds everything and everyone, and that wizards need to draw on this fluid, they need to channel it through themselves, and then they can craft it into magic. But they have to learn to focus, they have to learn to ignore themselves, their inner self, and they have to ignore emotions, because all of this will cause them to basically lose focus on the magic, and that will cause the whole thing to collapse. So that's kind of where we are at. They can change the laws of physics. And so there's all that sort of wonderful stuff. As they gain power, they can control more. Now we need to talk about the gods. And as I was watching the video that I recorded on the gods, it struck me that there are effectively 4 states that we as humans exist. No, let me rephrase. There are 5 states that we exist in terms of religions. And if I'm missing any, please let me know. We have the single all-powerful God. We have the pantheon of gods. We have the omnipresent and non-specific energy. We have reincarnation, where the gods are not really involved, but they'll bring you back and you just keep going through and through and through and through. So no real gods, really, just reincarnation. And then we have oblivion. We have science, which says that once you are dead, you're dead, and that's it. You're all that is you ceases to exist and is lost for all time. Those are the 5 that I can think of. Actually, there's a 6th one. There's a 6th one as well. And the 6th one is that the gods are amongst us. So if you think of the Egyptians, the pharaoh was supposedly a god. Kings ruled by divine right. They weren't exactly gods, but you could take it that the 6th option is a variant on the pantheon, and that it's pantheon as gods in the godly realm or gods on the surface, I suppose. So let's stick with 5. All right, so of those 5, I think they're also very interested. Laura Bones points out quite correctly that there is also self as a god. Yes, this is very true. The self is a god being and that sort of thing, although I don't think that that extends to having the ability to change or control the planet and things happening around you. So I tend to think of them in 3 groups, says Mars Anonymous. Gods you pray to help for, gods who send guidance and prophecies, and gods you give offers to so that they don't bother you. Well, I mean, the nuance of the gods, that's a whole different story. And if you look at the Greek and Roman ideologies in terms of the gods were there and you could petition them for things. But if you were also too lucky or too beautiful or too successful, the gods were going to punish you just because they didn't want anyone competing with them in terms of their own status. So yes, when it gets to designing the gods themselves, that's also a wonderful, exciting and interesting step. But first we have to decide about the gods themselves. So we talked about the creation myth in the video. We need to decide what kind of creation myth we're going to have. And to be absolutely honest with you, when you are designing a fantasy environment, which is what we are currently designing on, 1984, 19 nature as a god, as you're saying, that's kind of nature. That's the third version, which is the omnipotent non-entity force, life force thing, which is what Star Wars uses as this idea of the force, nature as the force, and that sort of thing. So I think that the idea of a single god certainly can work in fantasy. Why not? You have this all-powerful being that created everything. I kind of get the feeling, though, that they would tend to be like Q in Star Trek. Meddlesome, doing things because they're basically just interested to see what the outcome would be. And the unpredictability of the human condition causes the outcome to be indeterminate. That's one way of looking at it. Pantheon of gods, I mean, everybody's got a pantheon of gods, right? The triumvirate, the 8, the 9, the 12, the 192. I mean, it really doesn't matter how many are in there. Multiple beings sharing the same space, and then there's petty infighting between them. We can certainly do that. Nature, or the all-present force, that's fine, but we've kind of got magic in that space, and I don't think I want to muddle the waters of our world that we're busy building with that. Reincarnation opens up some interesting doors. And if it's like a built-in universal mechanic, it does solve the question of, well, can magic be used to bring back the dead? And looking at my notes, life and death, yes, but before soul's essence transcends to another dimension. That was what we had said in terms of how the magic works. If there is a built-in reincarnation tool, however, then the soul transcending to another dimension is actually just the soul being recreated as a new entity, being reborn. And that gives us the possibility of having characters who can draw on their past lives. They remember what they were, or there are people who help you remember what you were, and then suddenly you gain the skills from what you were before. So the really powerful warriors will be able to go back 4 or 5 lives and pick up all the fighting that they've learned throughout those 300 years or whatever it might be, to then draw on that themselves. It's kind of like the Trill from Star Trek to a large degree. So that would be something interesting. Let me just have a look at chat whilst that sort of rattles around in my head. Would the human king gods gather their worshippers during life to get a head start for the afterlife? Asks Mech. It's a good question. One true god who fragmented themselves into several other facets of a gem, reflecting different aspects. Could be. It's interesting. Cleric can be more like channelers of philosophical concepts, if I remember. Perhaps there would be tiers of gods. Could be. What about the child god? All powerful but childish? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Polytheism, Roman is my go-to, my sci-fi, as the Roman Emperor never fell in mine. Gods are now treated as cultural sayings now as tech progressed. Yep. Like one soldier to another would say, don't let miseria grasp you, brother. Miserable is the Roman Osius in god mythology, and is the personification of pain and distress. Okay, well, there we go. So that's reincarnation for you. That's my idea on reincarnation. I have not read a lot of modern day books. I'm going to confess, I don't have the time. I fall back on books that I've read before, like 100 times before. So the idea of this reincarnation thing and people being able to draw on their past lives could be interesting. Could be a nice risk as well if you draw on a past life where you were this ridiculously horrific person. That will come back to you and you'll remember all the things that you did as a horrid person. So that could be an interesting motivator. If it is reincarnation, then you go, okay, well, where did the universe come from? Okay, well, the universe by default, if reincarnation is the baseline, the universe was born out of a previous universe that collapsed and died and was recreated to be better or to be worse, depending on what the previous version of the universe was. This means we don't have to have gods. There are no deities running around. There is no one that provides power. So does that mean then that we are removing the entire class of cleric? Well, I don't think so. I think what we're doing is we're changing cleric from being a religious entity into being these diviners of the past who dig into your past and perhaps have the ability to not erase, but to quieten down the darker sides of your past, or to heighten the darker sides of your past. That could be something interesting. Just Nate says, thoughts on gods that are born out of collective belief and collective unconsciousness. A god of war arising out of a time of prolonged civil war, things like that. So absolutely. Now, when you look at that idea, Just Nate, the challenge is that god, once they are created because of, let's say, a war, they are going to want to continue to exist. So they're going to want to continue to perpetuate the war. But that's going to put them in direct opposition to, let's say, the god of life, or childbirth, who is trying to have more children, right? So these inter-god conflicts could be interesting to look at. And something that I spoke about in the video was these gods are going to be fighting amongst each other. And how do they do that on the prime material plane, you know, on the main land? It's like, so where is that battle fought? Is it fought up in Olympus, wherever the gods live, or is it fought on the planet's surface? And how do those gods interact? It creates some interesting questions. Another idea is, instead of reincarnation, you then have the idea of oblivion. There is nothing. So then what? What then is the case? Well, we would still have religion. Our own existence, I think, is an example of that, where you have individuals who need to give hope to the population. They need to inspire the population. They need to keep the population going. And over time, they need to control that population as well, make sure the population kind of remains towing the line, if you will. But I think primarily they probably started out as giving hope. If you think of those early days, will we be successful on the hunt today? Will we get hurt on the hunt today? Well, let me entreat the gods. Let me read the entrails of animals. Let me look at the stars. Let me look at the smoke. Let me look at tea leaves. All those kinds of things came out. And you go, okay, well, yes, you will be successful today. And so, yeah, that's another option. It just means that there is no inherent magic there. But what you would have to build in, and this is something that we as humans, I think, tend to overlook, is if you're told that you can do something by somebody that you believe actually knows the answer, you are far more likely to achieve that than if you go in thinking that you're not going to achieve it. So if you are about to go and run a race and your coach comes up to you and says, you are going to win this because I've looked at all the other runners and they're useless. So you're going to win this. Even though you've lost 3 times, you are going to win this one. There's no question about it. You're more likely to win it than if the coach came up to you and said, oh, you lost 3 times already, you're completely screwed, you might as well give up now. So that motivator, I think, would become a mechanic, that the priests have this ability to inspire and motivate people to cause their own success, if you will. That's another option. You know, I mean, that's what these things are. That's why they're so exciting when you look at building them. I think having a godless environment in terms of building a fantasy universe, although it's interesting, I feel like it does preclude a lot of very interesting things that can take place. And from a world building perspective, from a fantasy perspective, I don't particularly like that idea. So I'm going to do a little quick poll here for those of you that are watching. And if you feel that, well, let's narrow it down, shall we? So let's go one or poly. And so the answer is one and the other is poly. So let's start the poll. So do we have one god or do we have polygods? Now, this is not to say that this is the course that we are taking. This is just a voting option. We're going to vote again on something else moving forward, and we'll just do a process of elimination by proxy. I'm quite comfortable having any of the options that I've listed, any of those 5 options. I think all of them are interesting. The only one that I would be going, I need to look at that more, would be the Oblivion one. So let's have a look and see what you guys have voted on. Well, we've got definitely enough votes in. Almost everyone watching has voted, which is fantastic. I'm going to end that poll, and the answer is very clearly poly versus 1. Okay, so the next poll, just whittling this down, would be poly or nature. So poly refers to multiple gods. Nature refers to this idea of an entity, a non-intelligent entity, just a supernatural force, like the Force, that can be entreated to do good things, it can be entreated to do bad things, it can be entreated to protect, it can be entreated to heal, but it needs to be respected. And if you don't respect it, you will get some severe backlash of some kind. Now, when it comes to poly, by the way, multiple pantheons or even just a single pantheon with multiple gods, bear in mind that as much as you might love world creating and world building, if you've got more than 5 or 6 gods, your players are never going to remember them. They will never remember them. Your audience will go, who was this god now? The god of slightly loose door handles? Oh, all right. I mean, it could be funny. And certainly Terry Pratchett played on that in his Discworld series. God of Hangover, or the God of Hangovers, God of Lost Socks, all those kinds of things. Yeah. So let's have a look and see what the poll is doing there. Numbers going up and down, left and right. Everybody's voted. I'm going to end the poll. So we're sticking with poly for now. Poly for now. So, all right. Another vote coming in. God of biscuits. Oh, I'd kill for a biscuit right now. Right. The next one is poly or cycle, because I don't know how to spell reincarnation, and I already screwed up on spelling the announcement for today's post. Anyway, it's been a really long day of writing. Writing what? I will tell you at the end of the stream. But all I can say is that by tomorrow 12 lunchtime, I will be finished with draft 1. Some of you might know what that is already. But here's our next poll. Are we doing a cycle or are we doing poly? Bearing in mind the cycle of nature, so you are just constantly reborn and you can access your previous lives, your previous experiences and skills and things. Poly, pantheon, multiple gods, all that kind of stuff. You are fast on the voting tonight. That's fantastic. I really enjoy that. Almost everyone voted now. Again, we've still got a pretty solid dedication to multiple pantheons of gods. So I think that's going to be... I don't want to call it just yet. But, right, that's pretty much everybody who is watching the stream has now voted. So I'm going to end that poll, which leaves us with just the last option. Is that right? Have I done 5? 4? Probably. So this would be poly or oblivion. Oblivion being that there is no God at all. There are no gods whatsoever. There is just nothing. So that's 1, 2, 3. Who did I miss out? We've done one or poly. We've done poly or nature. Oh, that's right. And poly is itself. And then poly or cycle. And now we're doing the last one. Yeah, Laura Bones, you're absolutely right. Most fantasy people default to polytheism. Could use a front light on his right, camera left, or is it... Yeah, Arak, you joined the stream late, didn't you? And so you missed the announcement. It's 27 degrees Celsius. That's like 190 degrees in American Fahrenheit in the studio. It's just too hot for lights. The lights that are on at the moment are just the basic room lights. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying. But unless you want to watch me literally melting I cannot turn the lights on. Well, I've literally got them here. Look, look. See? I mean, do you want that to happen? Do you want that to happen? All right, fine. I'll leave it on for you. But, you know, that's it. Just for you. Okay. So, let's have a look at that vote. Pretty much stock standard. Look at that. 60-30, 70-20, 60-30, 80-20. So, right. Okay. It's pretty much fixed. We're going to do polytheism. So multiple pantheons. Polytheism. Right. And so, what I'm going to propose, polytheism, we said we don't want to bombard the players with too many different types of gods. I stand by that absolutely. However, with multiple gods and multiple pantheons of gods, this, I feel, now gives us a much more interesting opportunity than just a single pantheon. And so I want to explore that. So I think let's do it as, let's draw some inspiration from the Greek city-states and from Magic the Gathering. And so what that does is we get this bizarre shape, which I quite like. That's connected to that. That's connected to that. That's connected to that. Okay, so as you can see, I've drawn in my notes here, or you would be able to see if Eric hadn't shouted at me. Oh yes, it needs to focus. So there we go. I've drawn these 5 blocks. I think very visually that's how I work. And so those are each a pantheon. Those are each a pantheon. And so the players can worship a particular pantheon. So we've only got 5 pantheons, but within the pantheon there might be multiple gods working within that pantheon. So, and I think the pantheons need to have existed for a very long time. Now, there are a lot of creation myths that, you know, the planet was made to act as a battleground for the gods to send their warriors onto to fight it out and determine who's going to win. Why would they choose just one planet in the entire cosmos? I think they would have multiple planets across the cosmos, and they would be fighting as for each planet at a time, going, I want this planet, I want this one. Again, though, if the gods are immortal, if they are infinite, they don't care. They're not going to fight over anything. They are infinite. So we need to decide then what the gods, what is their power? Where is their power derived from? It's one of the big questions that I spoke about in the video. Where is their power derived from? And a lot of folks are talking about, you know, the worship of the people. The worship of the people becomes a self-defeating argument, in my opinion. The gods created the universe. Okay, fine. If they created the universe to worship themselves, why would they do that? Why would they do that? And I'm just reading Laura Bones' comment there. As I said in Discord, if the players won't remember the gods, that doesn't stop the gods from remembering them. For sure, absolutely. But then you as the GM or the storyteller have got to keep track of all these different gods and things. And I mean, that can be fun, but it can also become a little bit overwhelming. So the gods drawing power from the worshippers, fine. The gods realize that if they use all of their energy to create this universe, then they can generate energy within the universe to feed themselves again and to regain their power. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. That's a dynamic. And I think that is an interesting dynamic. Let's look at another one. What if the gods can't help themselves but spawn planets? And they create these planets in moments of anger or in moments of joy or celebration. And then the planets just do their own thing. And you go, okay, well, if that's the case, then what are the gods doing? Well, if you accidentally create this mold in the back of your fridge, and the mold suddenly starts having all these little interesting things going on it that are far more interesting in this lifetime of yours than have been in the past, then you might take an active interest. And if you're an infinite being, you can take an active interest on thousands of planets, and then you can start to compare, and you can start to have favorites. Like, I'm going to call this planet the green planet because the people living on it are all green-skinned. And, oh, I wonder what would happen if we took the green-skinned ones and we put them on the red-skinned ones and we put them on the purple-skinned ones' planets as well. Oh, look at that war. That's interesting. Didn't see that. Oh, they're working together. Oh, they combine together and they make a khaki color because when you mix too many colors together, you get khaki. Okay, interesting. All right, fine. Oh, I've created some more worlds. Let me go and have a look over there. So that could be something to think about. Lots of chat going on in as well. I think an infinite God is not inherently going to be dispassionate about reality necessarily. I think especially for polytheism, the gods can be driven by their nature to expand their domain. I really lean into the idea in my world building, what people believe and what really exists are often very different. Oh, for sure. Absolutely. So again, this just depends on how involved the gods are. They get their power from collecting souls. Souls could be like batteries. More souls equals more power. They've just got little terrariums for the gods to play with. Well, you see, this is the big thing, is that you say, well, basically, it is just a terrarium that generates power. That's what it boils down to in most religions. Is this, you know? So I'm going to make a decision that I feel that the power that the gods generate, the power, the gods have infinite power. They don't have they don't have to get it from anywhere. So I'm going to say infinite power. All right. Why are they invested in the people on the planets? Why would they give the people on the planets the ability to channel some of their power? Well, I think that this is where it gets interesting. Because one of the ideas that I thought could work was, what if the gods, each planet that they create, has a little piece of the god on it, in it. So 5 pantheons, 50 gods, a planet is constructed from those 50 gods' psyche. So within the planet there are these elements of the gods which priests can draw from. So they're not actually drawing from the god themselves, they're drawing from the piece of the god that got left in the planet. Kind of like a toenail clipping and the ants worshipping the toenail clipping. The god themselves, they don't care about the toenail clipping anymore. So I think that could work, possibly. Todd Starbuck, well, that's one god, or one shamrock, as someone once described it to me. But that I think is how it's going to work. God level Pokemon, got to catch them all. Well, all the pieces. So that's what I'm going to say, is that the gods create planets by leaving pieces of themselves in the planet, and that gives rise to sentient creatures who can draw power from the pieces. Now, I will say that as more worshippers draw more power, the gods become aware. Okay, so I'm just going to follow this line of thinking. And then the planet becomes a favored one. Okay, so then it gains more powers as the god starts to focus. And so, Sam, I don't see them as being physical entities, these magical artifacts. I think magical artifacts could contain a little piece of one of the gods, but it's not like that artifact would be the only thing that could draw power from it. It would be like saying that a lantern contains the light of a candle. Although it contains the candle, the light shines out. So I think that that's a nice idea, and I definitely think that the major cathedrals would claim to have reliquaries or relics or artifacts that contain this, and so you get these favored planets. And what I think could work quite interestingly there is that as the gods gain more favored planets, I still don't think they're going to care. I really don't think they're going to care amongst themselves. I mean, why would you? And so, Sam, you're quite right. There is a potential for the most favored planet, or an elevated planet, where the worshippers on that planet just achieve a kind of ascended harmony with the god. And so there we are. I think that is an interesting one. Would the gods fight with each other? Would the gods fight with each other? You are this all-powerful being, this super entity that mistakenly created the planets by thought, by thinking, oh, I wonder what it would be like if there was a planet that was entirely made out of water, or I wonder what it would be like if there was a universe, and there's this whole universe, right? So I think that's how it should work. I do feel, though, that the gods should be basic forces that could exist originally. They were basic forces, and they kind of gained sentience over time, and then that started to cause things to happen. I mean, that's a bit of a radical idea, but I do think it's quite fun. So if you then look at it, just working on the idea of the gods being forces, and I'm just spitballing here. And Mech, I think you've raised it. I think you've raised it really well. A piece could be destroyed, banished, or contained. So you could have these cults forming. And what a wonderful thing there is that you then have these planetary wars being fought over the fragments. The gods don't even know that these wars are happening. And they are still powering everybody because the fragments just do that naturally. Do the fragments of the gods left behind in the planets have any consciousness or will? Would they have different goals than the original gods? I don't think they would have... I mean, what's more interesting? Because ultimately that's the question, isn't it? What is more interesting? We've got 5 pantheons. And already I'm thinking in terms of the forces. I really don't want to fall back on the elements. I really don't want to fall back on the original elements, right? But they kind of work. They kind of work as these big houses, these big ideals. So I think that you would have as categories, you'd have the pantheon, I would say, of blood. You'd have, and the gods that are powered, or that believe that they are powered by blood. Yes, absolutely, Batfro. Studying and looking at actual creation myths is phenomenally amazing. The Egyptian creation myth is insane. So there's so many that you look at and you go, how did this get sold to the general public exactly? Maybe because it was so ludicrous, so insane. But yes, there you have it. So I'm just breaking them into broad strokes, broad categories. These different pantheons of gods that would focus on different things. Or that would be sort of centered around different things. Because if you think about it, Greek and Roman gods, they were so intermixed that there really wasn't much differentiation. But then you think about the Indian gods of the Hindu, for example, very different. Then you think about the gods of the Egyptians, very different in one sense. But in most senses, there was a protector, there was a warrior, there was a leader, there was a champion. But in some, there were these animalistic bases, right? My question would be, where do these gods live if they are more elemental in nature? Well, I would say that these gods, they become aware that planets are starting to draw more power from them, right? So they look at this planet and you go, oh, look, this little group of semi-sentient beings who cannot possibly comprehend space, time, and everything in it, and who have such finite little existences. From a god's perspective of infinity, a god blinks and an entire civilization of 10,000 years has disappeared, right? So the god has to focus and slow down and try and really get in there. Yeah, would they be manifested? Would they be visualized? I think the priests would create those mythologies. I don't think the gods themselves would. Why would a god say, all right, I'm going to go and visit this planet. Right, boom, I'm humanoid, or I'm dwarvish, or I'm elvish. I feel like the god would go, why are you so constrained by just these 3 dimensions? I'm a 92-dimensional being with 1,000 different arms, 1,000,000 genders, and 15 eyes on each of my limbs. And I sense the colors of sound. You know, it's something that we can bandy about, but I think that ultimately the priests would be the ones going, oh no, they've got to be this and they've got to be that. So yeah, lift, thrust, pitch, and yaw, says Laura Bones. Okay, I'll take that. The pieces are all part of the Wi-Fi password. You need a certain amount of pieces to log in and talk to God. I think that is brilliant. So I think that I think that could work. So what I've come up with while I've busy sort of rattling ideas around is that you've got a pantheon that are dedicated mainly to the laws. So I think that wizards who are learning to use magic know that there are constraints, know that there are limits, and the limits and nature has law. So within the pantheon of law, or law is the sort of general idea, that pantheon, the gods there are manifestations of the laws of the universe, life and death, that kind of stuff. Then I would have the physical pantheon. These are gods that really are about the physicality of life, flesh and blood, the notions of thought and dreams and all that kind of stuff. That's intangible. It's nothing that you can latch onto. Whereas the physical manifestations, the ability to touch something makes it real. And I think that's what that pantheon would be on. I think there'd be a pantheon to magic. I think that would make sense. A pantheon to thought. So not magic, but to thought, to theology, to... laws equals physics. Richard Gilson, absolutely. Laws equal physics. And then I'd have one for thought, which is thought experiments, dreaming, divining, seeing the future, that kind of stuff. And then passion. I think passion would be the last sort of block in that space. So you can imagine within passion, you might have 200 gods. And one is a muse just for music. One is a muse just for war and a passion for war. One would be a god just for recreation. One would be for childbirth. You know, the passions that flow and that drive. They're not, sometimes they're not, thought doesn't come into it when you're passionate. You're just doing it because you can. But it's not magic either. There isn't an external force. It's an internal force. So that's how they're kind of in opposition to each other. And the physical would say, well, passion comes from the physical body. It doesn't come from, it's not, there isn't, cut a man's head open and his brain stops working. There's no more passion in the body. Take their heart out, the whole thing stops. There's no more passion in the body. It's the physical that drives everything. So you start to see how you can get these wonderful oppositional pantheons existing, but also at the same time, when they are sitting, debating and thinking, they create worlds, because they're bringing together all of the components that you need to create worlds. The physics, physical, magic, thought, and passion. So I think that that's possibly how they could work. They could be seen as being in opposition. So if these pantheons created, so were these pantheons created by people? No. If the gods came first, would they know music or other human things? But you see, this is the crux of creation myth, is that the gods are in almost all cases either already in existence for all time and have been and always will be, or they are the children of previous gods that they have usurped or eaten or stolen the power of or reproduced with and given birth to themselves. You know, there are a lot of explanations for where these infinite beings come from. So what the argument would be is that music, the laws of physics pantheon would state that the god of music, which is very mathematical, it's very, very precise, comes from the pantheon of law. At the same time, the pantheon of passion would say, yes, but you cannot play music without passion. You have to embrace it. You have to love it. And the thought folks would say, yes, but you can't write music if you don't have thought. You have to have thought. So we are involved more than law and more than passion. You know, and the physicals would say, well, go ahead, make music without doing anything. Don't use any physical parts to make music. Yeah, thought so. It's all about the physical. So I feel like they could be conflicting things, and you could have a bard who is a worshipper of, let's say, Dot, the goddess of music, from the physical pantheon. It wouldn't be called the physical pantheon, obviously, but this is just how I break things down when I'm creating them, as I kind of create, okay, this is what they represent. So now when I start to break them down, okay, the physical gods, so the physical muse of music is not going to be some light wisp of a thing. They're going to be someone who is physically there. Compare, let's say, I don't know, a very, very ethereal being which thought might use as the physical representation of their god of music, as opposed to the physical god of music, which might be a drummer who has the most basic of music was a drum. That was the very first thing that humans did, was drum, create a beat. That's a very physical act too, and you need to be strong to do that. So their drummer, it might be percussion, was the very first thing that comes to mind. So that's what I do, is I try and compartmentalize, and I try and work out and then say, okay, so you've got this bard of drumming who is also quite happy to work with the bard from a passion goddess of music as well. Although they would probably compete to say, well, yes, you set the beat, but without us there is no melody, or at least the beat means nothing. We need to invigorate that beat. So that's how I think it could work. Let's have a look and see. I think magic could arise from any of these god elements, worshipping the pantheon and the passions, and you get the ability to influence, manipulate your own. Absolutely. So you see, this is where it comes in, is that magic itself, there is a pantheon of magic. And you go, well, surely all wizards would worship the pantheon of magic. No, this is not magic in the sense of a spell book. The gods didn't create a spell book. The pantheon of magic are gods who enshrine the idea of this all-pervasive magic and who believe that magic is the key to controlling the universe and to controlling everything. But that doesn't mean that the pantheon of passion doesn't have a god of magic as well, who believes that magic, although it comes from, sure, the physical laws of the universe, you can't do anything with it. Look at the animals. What do they use magic for? They use magic to teleport themselves directly onto their prey, to teleport themselves directly away from their predators, to hide themselves, to reveal hidden things. It is not magical. It is just an ability. You have to add passion into it to make it magical. And the thought is going, yes, but you can't sustain it without thought. Animals cannot sustain their hidden form for more than a few seconds because their brains are not trained. They don't have the thought capacity. Again, I always look at it and I go, okay, where is there a point of conflict within all of this so that you can set up these conflicts? At the same time, where is something that people who are reading this can latch onto? Because making something that is nonsensical, that's just absolute random, I think is very, very problematic. So where do the gods come from, to answer that question? Our gods have always been, they always will be. Is this a question that we really have to answer? How can you have a natural law in the universe in this example, asks Peter White. Well, as far as the law pantheon is concerned, there you have a god of gravity. Who is the god that causes things to fall down when you drop them? Who is the god that causes the birds to fly in the sky? Remember, a lot of religion is to explain inexplicable things and to give meaning to inexplicable things so that we can rationalize our universe. So the physical laws are all housed within the gods of law. At the same time, the pantheon of the physical would come in and say, hey, describe it as a mathematical principle. Knock yourself out. But you can't. Not with a principle. You can knock yourself out with an actual rock. So the god of rock, which is what you need in order to have a planet, is actually the one responsible for rocks falling to the ground, because that's where rocks belong. You don't find rocks in the sky, do you? Don't be stupid. So you find them on the ground, therefore there has to be a god of rocks to make sure that rocks stay on the ground. And if you throw a rock in the air, the god of rocks will make sure that it comes down onto the ground. It's as simple as that. It's physical. There's nothing to it. Thank you very much for playing. Perhaps the school of thought, the pantheon of thought, would argue, well, what actually are we seeing? Are we seeing rocks in the sky? Are we seeing rocks being thrown? Are there laws behind those rocks? If you drop a rock at the top of a mountain and it rolls all the way down, will it follow the same path every single time? Which is what the law folks would have you believe, or the physical folks would have you believe, that it's a god who's doing that. No. The rock has destiny. It knows its path and it will follow its own path because it has the ability to have thought in some way. So I think, yes, that is what I would do. Not confrontational at all. These are questions. We're being creative. We must ask these kinds of questions. We must explore the answers. And if you're excited by those answers, that's when you know that you're onto a good thing. But if you're answering and you're going, oh, this is rather dull, rather boring, actually, then you know, right, time to change it up. The god of rocks hates the god of levitation magic, who has an entire planet of floating sky rocks. Well, you see, there you go. There you go. Look at that. We've now got some conflict coming in. Thank you from Sam. Where, yes, can you imagine the physical priest of the god of rocks visits this area where the rocks are all floating in the sky? How does he explain it? Well, clearly this part is blessed by the god of rocks. This is where the rocks that have been good, who've always fallen to the ground and done what they should, this is where they come to, and they get to float in the sky. Isn't that nice? And just to screw with everybody, I'd make sure that all of the birds in that area, by the way, can't fly. And they're all things like ostriches or giant elephant birds. So that you go, you see, but the birds aren't flying. So therefore, everything has stayed the same. It's just inverted because of, reasons. So there you go. So I think that is fine. That is what we are looking for. So with that in mind, we're nearly at the end of the stream. Our creation myth is that the gods created everything by having thoughts and left pieces of themselves in these planets, which is where the priests draw their powers from. What are those powers? That's something that we have to look at. What are the limits of those powers? And where do those powers and how do those powers manifest? We do not want it to be a duplication of magic. Magic is this all-pervasive fluid that floats around in the magical domain, and you can draw it into the physical realm by focusing on it and concentrating it and drawing it in and then using it. We do not want divine power to operate in the same way. That is something that I have found 5th edition has, and this is Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, I feel that the magic is a lot less distinct than it was in, say, 3.5. That's me personally, but that's kind of what I personally feel. So I wanted to be very, very, very different. The god of rocks is the most powerful god because it always comes back to rocks doing what rocks do. Well, it could be. Would the god of laws often be overshadowed by the physical gods then too, since most applications relate to physical gods? Would the law gods resent that? Well, of course. I think the law gods are the ones going, hey, look, without us, none of this works. Okay? Our god of fire is the one who made sure that if you strike steel with flint, you get a spark. Yes, law physical gods. Yes, it's flint. Yes, it's stone that's being struck together. But if our laws didn't exist, if our god of fire didn't exist, your god of fire would be able to do bugger all. But no one thinks about that, do they? So, except for all the followers of the gods of laws. So I do think that there's going to be that kind of banter. I don't think the gods themselves are going to care. I think this is more on a priest level, that the priests are going to be worried about this kind of thing. Because as we've said, the more that gets drawn from the god particle on the planet, the more the gods pay attention and the planet, that particular group become favored. But what are the limits? What are the limits? So perhaps the limit is a physical one. Divine magic takes a physical toll on oneself. It could be. Let's think about this. So with magic, it's like trying to gather together water in a swimming pool and form it into a shape in your hand while surrounded by water, and then send it out into the water and focus on it remaining in shape. That's the closest analogy that I can think of. With divine magic, the magic is being channeled through the priest. So I would almost feel like it's about the priest letting go. So the exact opposite of magic, where magic, the wizard is all about focus, concentration, ignoring the passion of the self, ignoring what's going on, ignoring sensation, and just remaining focused on the magical point. I feel like the priest is almost the person doing those 3D pictures, those mystery pictures where you have to stare at it, but completely not stare at it as well. I feel like the priest is a conduit. So I think you're onto something there. The flesh bodies aren't meant to channel divine power. I do like that. I think that could be really interesting. I think that could be really interesting. So priests are conduits for power and can burn out if drawing too much power, must empty themselves to let power through. And on that idea, I'm going to say that godly manifestation is via a priest. So the priests are channeling this power. They channel too much, they're going to get burnt up from the inside. So pureness of body and mind, letting go, going in the flow state, and letting go of your mortality to tap into that godly power. Yes, exactly, something like that. Whereas the moment you try and control it, the moment you try and impose your own will upon it, which is what the wizards are doing, that's when you burn out, because your brain, your will is insignificant in comparison to the will of a god. So you really have to just relax and go with the flow. Otherwise you will just be burned up. And I do think that that has a wonderful little self-control mechanism that then happens. The priests are not going to use divine power to gain power, because you just can't. The priests are going to use the religion to gain power. And so in a world building space, you're going, okay, so you've got these priests who by nature need to be very neutral, very zen-like, very calm, but you will still have power-hungry individuals who are more bureaucratic and who control the congregations and the tithes from the congregations, and who herd all of these little zen-like priests who are running around channeling the divine energy to make the crops grow and to do this and to do that and the next thing. I think that that could work really well. Now, what I am going to say is that to use a power, to use a god power, the priest must explain how their god works to make this happen. The spell describes the success. So what that means is that the priest is going, all right, we want the crops to grow. We want the crops to grow. We're going to bless this field. Bring greatness to this field. I wish for this field to grow. I am going to call upon the great god of nature from the physical pantheon, whatever the pantheon's name is going to be. The pantheon of the great turtle. I call upon the priest of nature from the pantheon of the great turtle. Priest of nature. Plants put down roots and they grow upwards. They push aside the soil. They pull in water and nutrients from that soil. And that is how you shall make them grow. For you will make this physical soil rich in nutrients, which is what the plants need. Assuming that the priests know how plants work. So that would be invoking the power of the nature god from the pantheon of the great turtle. From the pantheon of, let's say, thought, or the pantheon of the earthworm, the same god of nature, well, a god of nature from the pantheon of the earthworm, would be a case of, we know that when we sleep, that is when the trees grow. For when we wake up in the morning, the trees are bigger and taller, and so are the plants. And so we beg you that whilst we sleep this evening, you create these trees to grow as fast and as hard and as well as they can. And so then off we go that way. So do you see what I mean? This is how it would have to be phrased, and how the priests would propagandize their process as well, making sure that everyone knows that it's their god of nature, whatever their name might be, and that their god is the one doing it. So you might have sort of competing priests all praying over this field using multiple god particles to cause this field to just explode the next morning. But none of those priests could have any kind of ego. They couldn't be using it to manipulate. Not one of them could be standing there going, oh, please, great god of physical laws, make the sun beat down so hard on this field that everything wilts and dies tomorrow. that would be an evil priest. But again, it's like, okay, well, it still has to be, you still have to manifest it. So anyway, right. Lots of chat going on, which is wonderful. I wish I could read it more. Looking the other way around, priests can shape the world with their belief and faith, so much so they create gods unknowingly. So gods depend 100% on their followers, drawing power from their something or other. Yeah, so I mean, I remember this from a Teen Titans episode. Raven's power comes from channeling and controlling the energy, while Starfire's is all about letting go and freeing up the emotions. Yeah, it's lovely. With Raven, she was so powerful she had to suppress her emotions or she'd destroy the world, whereas Starfire had to have strong emotions to use her power. For sure. I mean, this is the joy of world building, right? Is you start to create these things and you start to say, well, I'm just going to do this. And you go, oh, look at what that spawned. Look at what that's come from. Anyway, we are done in one sense with creating our gods. Do you need them? Do you not need them? I think well, from a voting perspective, it certainly seems like everybody wants gods in their world. I think it adds an interesting element. Something that we never even touched on, however, and this is something for us to ponder and possibly to do as a stream at some point in the future, is what happens from a punishment perspective. Because a lot of times, most religions, there was a punishment. There was a judging of the soul, a judging of the actions of the person, and a repercussion for that person not doing anything. Even in reincarnation mythology, there is still a judgment. If you were a bad person, you would come back as a lower life form. If you were a good person, you'd come back as a higher life form. So there is a judgment factor. Now, the gods in this world that I have created, there is zero judgment going on. The gods do not care at all what you do. If you burn up as a priest using godly power, no god is going to come in and say, you were a good priest, you gave your all. They're not going to do that. They simply do not care. They're completely dispassionate. The priests might say, oh, well, the god of death from the physical is that everything just dies and you turn into dust and you feed the plants and you continue the cycle. God of magic might say, well, your body enters into the fluid that surrounds us and you become part of the magic. You can have that sort of thing adding in there. But what is the real case? What is the real outcome? What is the idea? Rocks fall, everyone dies. Well, that's only, that's what happens when you piss off the god of rocks, is you have hailstorms, right? So I don't feel like I would be comfortable with this pantheon being vindictive or nasty. I think that would be the priesthoods themselves that are doing that. So perhaps that is the answer, is that when you die, your little essence or whatever it is simply just rejoins with the God particle that you were most in tune with. And if you weren't in tune with any particular one, your energy is just absorbed by all of them. That could work. But it then cuts out the entire area that a lot of fantasy has, which is then you wouldn't have devils or demons. There's no one to run or manage the afterlife. You would have no Anubis. There would just be this thing. So perhaps I need to put some thought into that, and we'll have a look and see. We're moving on in the next world building episode, which I'm not sure when it's going to come out. Now, I did promise you that I was going to tell you what I had finished writing, or what I will have finished writing by tomorrow noon, and I know I can confidently say that. This is not one of those, oh, I think I can finish it. This is, I will have finished it by noon tomorrow. I've literally got maybe 10 entries to write. So the next Kickstarter is going to be launching in November. And it is a book that I have been writing for quite a long time. It was actually the second book that I started writing, although it has been delayed because of other books. But I will be starting my Kickstarter in November, and the book is the practical guide, complete guide, a guide, my guide, the guide, whatever you want to call it, to being a great player. And it's all my thoughts and ideologies and everything that I think makes a great player. And it looks at not only character building and backstory building and mechanical building and how do you build a mechanically strong character, but it looks at what do you have to do as the player. What is your social contract? Why would you want a session 0? How can you do evil characters well? How can you do good characters well? How can you be a leadership character? Everything that I have ever spoken on character creation is in this book. It's quite a tome at the moment. We're about 87,000 words. So looking at 200 plus pages, it will be in our usual format. And so yes, that's going to be launching in November. And I don't like launching books that I haven't already finished writing. So that's why I say tomorrow I finish writing in the encounters. If you have got epic campaigns or practical guide to being a great GM, you'll know that I like to do encounters, which are little challenges that you can do at the end of each of the concepts that are presented in the books to end up with, in this case, you'll end up with a complete character. I finished writing all of the material. Now I'm just going through and adding in those encounters, which doesn't take very long. And then that's it. It goes off to the editor to start proofreading and all that kind of stuff, and layout and design, etc., etc. So I'm very excited about that. And it's yes, a practical guide to being a great player. Sign me up, guy, says Prr. Lovely. Well, yes, hopefully you will enjoy it. Now, there might be a little bit less videos coming out for the next few weeks. I'm going in for eye surgery on Thursday. It's simply so I can get rid of my glasses. But they have warned me that I will be unable to stand in front of very bright lights, like the ones that Eric forced me to turn on, for about a week or so, give or take. I'm very excited. In my 43 years of existence, I have never, ever, ever owned a pair of sunglasses, and I have now ordered a pair to arrive tomorrow because they have said after surgery you have to wear sunglasses for a couple of days. So there might be some videos coming out next week or the week after because of that, but who knows? Who knows? Stranger things have happened. Anyway, until we meet again, I just want to say thank you for joining me in this stream. Thank you for voting on the stream and for sharing your thoughts. Yes, Per, you're right. It is LASIK surgery. So very simple stuff. Surgery takes 45 seconds. Anyway, we'll see what happens. Right, folks, have a great evening. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.